We are excited for the Friends of Cancer Research 2023 annual meeting. One of the topics at the Friends annual meeting this year is about early phase trials, how to implement and interpret the data from dose finding trials. Follow along with the conversation on X using the hashtag FriendsAM23. Our annual meeting will take place on November 14th, both online and in person in Washington, D.C. Over the last few years, FDA has emphasized the importance of dose finding in early phase clinical trials, including the establishment of Project Optimus. The goal of Project Optimus is to educate, innovate, and collaborate with companies, academia, professional societies, international regulatory authorities, and patients to move forward with a dose finding and dose optimization paradigm across oncology that emphasizes selection of a dose or doses that maximizes not only the efficacy of a drug, but the safety and tolerability as well. To support the field with achieving the goals of Project Optimus, Friends has had discussions and wrote white papers over the last few years. In 2021, we discussed perceived challenges with performing early phase dose finding trials and opportunities to overcome them. And in 2022, we discussed opportunities for including patient-reported outcomes in dose-finding studies. The key questions that continued after these conversations were how to implement these studies and how to interpret the results. We established a new working group to discuss approaches about implementation and interpretation. We had first discussed the key challenges that establish the totality of evidence, including the type of data collected in each category, challenges with the current approach for collection, and opportunities for improving data collection. We know that these trials are complex and completed in a small number of patients, so it is critical to be thoughtful about which data are collected and ensure that there's not a large burden on the patients or sites. The 5 categories are pharmacokinetics, or how the body interacts with the drug, pharmacodynamics, or how the drug interacts with the body, efficacy, or whether the therapy treats the patient's disease, safety, whether the therapy is safe for the patient, and tolerability, how adverse events associated with the therapy impact patient adherence. We expanded the discussion on tolerability, including the use of patient-reported outcomes due to the goals of Project Optimus emphasizing the topic. When discussing how to interpret the data that establish the totality of evidence to determine the optimal dose, we considered 3 dosing decisions during the dose-finding studies. Dose-finding studies are broken into 3 goals: dose escalation, dose expansion, and registrational. The dose escalation trial tests multiple doses informed by preclinical evidence and a toxicity-adjusted dose escalation to identify a dose range for future studies. Dose expansion ideally randomizes at least 2 doses suggested by the dose escalation studies, focused on exposure response to determine doses for the registrational trials. And the registrational trial uses doses that are identified from dose expansion to analyze safety and efficacy for registrational purposes. Within these studies, there are 3 decision points about dosing that we discussed with the group. Dose decision 1 was between and within dose levels during the dose escalation studies. Dose decision 2 was at the end of dose escalation to identify doses for dose expansion. And dose decision 3 was at the end of dose expansion to identify doses for the registrational trial. In the white paper, we discussed the various data available at each of these decision points and how to consider it to determine the dose. During the Friends annual meeting on November 14th, the panelists will discuss the types of data that are collected during dose-finding trials, consider how to prioritize the data collection, and propose ways to interpret these data in the identification and selection of the optimal dose for registrational trials. We hope that you'll join us on the 14th. Please use the QR code to register for the meeting.